The dim glow of the marquee lights flickered uncertainly as the cast of The Laughing Shadows gathered backstage. Evelyn, the lead actress with eyes that held secrets she never spoke of, adjusted her costume in the cracked mirror, the reflection warped by age and neglect. Her auburn hair was pinned meticulously, but a rebellious strand kept falling over her brow. Her heart pounded, not from opening night jitters, but from an unshakable sense of dread that had settled over the theater like an unwelcome fog. The musty scent of old wood and dust filled the air, mingling with the sharp tang of stage makeup. Beside her, Mark, the cynical veteran actor with a penchant for dark humor, fiddled with his prop cane, the ornate handle worn smooth by years of use. He hummed an old lullaby under his breath, the notes discordant and eerie in the silence. The ancient theater creaked and groaned, its worn velvet curtains and faded gilded edges whispering tales of forgotten glories and lingering shadows. Around them, the rest of the cast moved like specters, their faces masks of forced excitement. Beneath the surface, a current of unease rippled through them all, each feeling the weight of unseen eyes upon them. Evelyn glanced toward the dimly lit corridor that led deeper into the labyrinthine backstage. Shadows clung to the corners, shifting ominously with each flicker of the failing overhead lights. She could have sworn she saw fleeting movement, a flicker of color like a clown's costume disappearing around a corner. Her pulse quickened, a cold sweat prickling at her temples. Shaking off the thought, she turned to Sophie, the timid newcomer whose eyes darted nervously around, her fingers twisting the fabric of her skirt. "Did you hear that?" Sophie whispered, her voice barely audible over the muffled sounds of the orchestra warming up. A distant, hollow laughter seemed to echo from the depths of the theater, sending a shiver down their spines. Evelyn frowned, the hair on the back of her neck rising as the unsettling sound faded into silence. She tried to dismiss it as nerves, but the weight of unseen eyes bore into her. The air grew heavy, the once familiar backstage now twisted into a maze of looming silhouettes and fading echoes. The sense of being watched was almost palpable, wrapping around her like a vice. As the first act drew to a close, chaos erupted backstage. Props were misplaced, scripts altered, and stage cues went awry with uncanny precision. The laughter that had buoyed the cast earlier was replaced with sharp words and anxious glances. Mark stormed into the green room, seething. "Who thinks it's funny to swap my cane with one that collapses?" he snarled, brandishing the broken prop, his knuckles white with anger. His usual sarcasm was edged with genuine fear. The others exchanged uneasy looks, shaking their heads in denial. Before anyone could respond, a piercing scream shattered the air, slicing through their tension like a knife. Rushing toward the sound, they found Sophie clutching her hand, blood seeping through her fingers where a razor had been concealed in her bouquet of flowers. Tears streamed down her face, her eyes wide with shock. Panic surged through the cast as whispers of sabotage and malevolent pranks spread like wildfire. The atmosphere thickened with suspicion, each member casting doubtful glances at one another. The director's attempts to restore order fell flat, his authoritative voice drowned out by the rising tide of fear. Evelyn's mind raced as the incidents escalated, her thoughts a tangled web of dread and suspicion. The stage trapdoor malfunctioned, nearly swallowing David, the light-hearted understudy whose laughter had always brightened rehearsals. His usual cheerful demeanor was replaced with a haunted look, his hands trembling as he recounted the near miss. The director dismissed the events as accidents, his denial a flimsy shield against the growing terror. But Evelyn knew better. The pattern was too deliberate, the timing too precise. She confronted Mark, whose cynicism had given way to palpable fear, his facade of indifference crumbling. "This isn't coincidence," she insisted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Someone is targeting us." Mark's gaze darted nervously around. "I saw something," he admitted reluctantly, his voice strained. "A clown, lurking in the rafters, watching us. I thought I was imagining it." Evelyn's blood ran cold as she recalled the fleeting glimpse from earlier. Doubt gnawed at her, but determination flared. They resolved to investigate, venturing deeper into the theater's underbelly, a place long abandoned and whispered to be haunted. As they descended the creaking stairs, the air grew stale, and the whispers of the theater seemed to follow them like ghostly echoes. The bowels of the theater were a labyrinth of decay and darkness, a forgotten realm where time stood still. Dust motes floated in thin beams of light piercing through cracks, and the scent of damp and mold hung heavily. Faded posters of shows long past adorned the walls, the faces of actors smiling eerily from peeling paper. As they navigated the narrow passages, the distant sounds of laughter, warped and distorted, echoed eerily, sending chills through their bodies. Suddenly, the clown emerged from the shadows, a grotesque figure with smeared makeup, eyes gleaming with malice beneath a tattered hat. Its costume was a patchwork of colors, stained dark in places that suggested old blood. It moved with unnatural agility, limbs jerking at odd angles, cornering them with predatory grace. Mark stumbled back, tripping over a loose board, his ankle twisting painfully as he fell. The clown advanced, producing a handful of razor-sharp playing cards, which it threw with lethal precision. The cards sliced through the air, embedding in the wall inches from Evelyn's face. Heart hammering, she grasped a rusted metal rod leaning against the wall, her hands shaking violently, and stood her ground. "Why are you doing this?" she cried, her voice echoing in the emptiness. The clown's grin widened impossibly, revealing rows of jagged teeth. "Because the show must go on," it hissed, its voice a distorted mockery of human speech. The malevolence in its gaze was a physical force, pressing in on them. In a flash of desperate courage, Evelyn swung the rod as the lights flickered violently, the shadows around them twisting and writhing as if alive. The metal connected with the clown, but instead of solid flesh, it passed through a cold void, causing the figure to waver and ripple like a disturbed reflection. Realizing it thrived on the darkness of their fear, she shouted to Mark, "We can't be afraid. It feeds on it." The weight of her own terror threatened to overpower her, memories of past failures and losses surging forward. Gathering every ounce of resolve, they confronted their inner demons, voicing their deepest fears aloud. Mark spoke of his regrets, the loneliness hidden behind his sarcasm, tears streaking his face. Evelyn confessed her insecurities, the crushing pressure to be perfect, the shadows she carried. As they faced their vulnerabilities, the clown's form began to distort, its laughter turning to agonized screams that reverberated through the corridors. The walls seemed to quake, dust raining down as the entity writhed. Light flooded the corridor from an unknown source, brilliant and blinding. The clown dissipated into a swirl of mist, fragments of its form dissolving into the air with a final, echoing shriek that faded into silence. Back on stage, the final act proceeded without incident, but an unspoken weight hung over the cast. The audience remained blissfully unaware of the horrors that had unfolded beneath their feet, their faces alight with enjoyment. Evelyn and Mark exchanged a silent understanding, their eyes reflecting the ordeal they'd shared and the secrets they'd unearthed. As the curtain fell and applause erupted, filling the theater with thunderous approval, Evelyn glimpsed a flicker of color in the audience. a hint of a clown's garb vanishing among the exiting crowd. Her heart skipped a beat, but a strange calm settled over her. A chill brushed her skin, yet she held on to the newfound strength within, the bonds forged through shared adversity. The vicious cycle had been broken, but the scars remained, a haunting reminder that some shadows never fully fade. As they took their bows, Evelyn felt a sense of closure yet acknowledged the lingering unease. The theater seemed to exhale, the oppressive atmosphere lifting slightly. Outside, the night air was crisp, the stars indifferent witnesses to their trials. They parted ways with quiet farewells, each carrying the weight of their experiences. Evelyn paused at the theater's exit, casting one last glance back. In the dim light, she thought she saw a shadow move, but when she blinked, it was gone. With a resolved breath, she stepped into the night, aware that courage is not the absence of fear, but the will to face it despite the horrors that lurk in the darkness.